Chapter 1. A New Beginning. I remember the day I first set foot on the campus of Minnesota College. The plane had landed while it was still dark, and within a few hours, the dawn greeted me with a faint mist above the pavement. Autumn here had its own scent, a blend of maple leaves and coffee from a small cafe near the main building, where students lined up for their morning cup. I was excited, yet at the same time, a little frightened. My backpack felt unusually heavy, even though it only carried a few things, some books, a notebook, a couple of changes of clothes. But inside me, I carried more than just belongings. I carried hopes and fears, memories from home, and dreams of a new life. The campus impressed me right away. Tall red brick buildings looked old and wise, like silent witnesses of hundreds of student stories. On the lawns, groups of students sat together, some laughing, some strumming guitars, others simply reading. I felt like a stranger among them. My English was good, but I still caught myself thinking that they spoke faster than I could keep up with in my head. I moved into the dormitory. The room was small, with 2 beds, a wardrobe, and a desk by the window. My roommate, a tall guy named Josh, originally from Iowa, shook my hand firmly and said with a grin, "Here's the deal. Make sure you turn in your essays on time and never forget about midnight pizza." I laughed, though I didn't fully understand his joke yet. That was my first evening in this new world. The next weeks went by quickly. The lectures were tough but fascinating. Professors demanded a lot but were always willing to help. I was especially captivated by U.S. history. I devoured everything I could find in the library. Sometimes I stayed there late into the night, flipping through thick yellowed pages. Despite everything, I felt lonely. Yes, I was meeting people, but I didn't have real friends yet. On weekends, other students went home or partied, while I stayed in the dorm and stared out at the city lights through the window. Sometimes I asked myself, did I make the right choice? Should I have stayed home instead? But one evening, something happened that shattered my illusion of safety in this country. It was a cold October night. I was returning from the library, holding a few books under my arm. The path through the campus was quiet, only the wind swayed the branches above me. I walked slowly, savoring the peace, when suddenly I saw flashing lights. A police car swerved abruptly from the main road and stopped right beside me. A blinding spotlight lit up my face. I raised my hand to shield my eyes and heard a loud shout, "Hands up! Don't move!" Fear froze me. I couldn't move. My mind raced. Why are they yelling at me? What did I do? 2 officers stepped out of the car. One kept his hand on the holster. The other already had his gun drawn. They moved toward me quickly, step by step. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" One barked. I tried to answer, but words stuck in my throat. My tongue wouldn't obey. Cold sweat ran down my back. Finally, I forced myself to speak, my voice trembling. "I'm a student. I study here. I have documents." The officer nearest to me gestured sharply. "Show the backpack." Slowly. Carefully, I slid the backpack off my shoulder and handed it over. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. While one cop rummaged through my things, the other kept his weapon pointed straight at me. I saw how close his finger was to the trigger. Then he pulled out my student ID. For a moment, silence fell. I watched his every move, his every breath. Finally, he looked up and said coldly, "Mistake. You can go." They got back in the car and drove off, leaving me in the darkness. I stood frozen in the middle of the road. My books slipped from my hands. I was shaking all over. In that instant, I realized something. America was not only the land of opportunity, it was also a place where one random mistake could cost you your life. Chapter 2. The Night That Changed Everything. After that night, I was never the same. On the surface, everything looked normal. Classes, dorm life, student worries. But deep inside, one thought haunted me. What if they had pulled the trigger? I woke up in the middle of the night with my heart pounding, as if the spotlight was blinding me all over again. The shouts echoed in my head, "Hands up! Don't move!" I replayed the scene over and over, looking for something I could have done differently. But the answer was always the same nothing. It was pure chance that I survived. I tried to move on. During the day, I went to lectures, joked with Josh, ate pizza in the student cafeteria. But at night, I avoided going outside. I was terrified even by the sound of footsteps behind me. A few days later, I told the dean about the incident. He listened carefully, his brows furrowed, then said, "You need to file an official complaint. This is important not just for you, but for other students as well." I hesitated. In my mind, a voice whispered, "What if the police retaliate? What if they really start watching me?" But at the same time, I knew silence wasn't an option. The next day, I wrote a letter. I described everything, from the moment they stopped me to the instant I stood trembling in the road. I sent it to the city administration and the university. A week later, my story appeared in the local newspaper. The headline screamed, "Minnesota college student nearly shot due to police mistake." That morning, I woke up to dozens of messages on my phone. Friends from the dorm sent me links. Journalists asked for interviews. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My story was spreading all over the city. My first feeling was relief. Finally, someone had listened. But the very next day, fear replaced it. I started noticing police cars near campus more often than usual. Maybe it was just my imagination, but my chest tightened every time. Josh tried to cheer me up. "You did the right thing. They had no right to treat you like that. But now, be careful." Inside, I felt both pride and dread. Pride that I had spoken out. Dread because I realized I was now in the spotlight. Lectures became the hardest part. I sat there listening to professors, but my mind kept drifting back to that night. I could almost see the spotlight again. I could almost hear the shout, "Don't move," echoing nearby. One evening, I finally dared to attend a meeting of the Student Human Rights Club. There were guys and girls fighting injustice from racial discrimination to dorm issues. I shared my story with them. They listened in silence. When I finished, a girl named Amy said, "What you're doing matters. You've given a voice to those who are afraid to speak." Her words lit a spark inside me, a wave of warmth. For the first time, I felt I wasn't alone. But at the same time, it meant there was no turning back. I had become the face of a story that could change more than just my own life. Chapter 3: A Voice That Broke the Silence. When my story appeared in the newspaper, I thought it might fade away after a few days, like most headlines do. But instead, it snowballed. What began as a terrifying mistake in the middle of the night turned into something much larger, a fight for truth, safety, and justice. Within days of the article's release, I was invited to speak on a local TV station. I had never been in front of a camera before. The studio was cold, the bright lights almost burning my skin, and the camera lens stared at me like an unblinking eye. The host smiled politely, but I could see the anticipation in her eyes. Another sensational story. I swallowed hard as the microphone was clipped to my shirt, and when the red light above the camera blinked on, I knew there was no going back. I told them everything, how I was walking back from the library that night, the screech of tires, the blinding spotlight, the barked orders, the gun barrels aimed directly at me. My voice trembled, and my hands clenched into fists on my knees. Yet, I spoke. Every word felt like peeling open a wound, but also like letting it finally breathe. When the interview aired, my phone lit up with messages. Strangers reached out. Some thanked me for speaking. Others told me their own horror stories of being stopped, searched, humiliated, sometimes hurt, all because of a mistaken identity. It was overwhelming. I realized my near-death moment. The aftermath was swift. The police department issued a public statement acknowledging the mistake. The 2 officers involved were placed under disciplinary investigation. City officials promised reforms, new training for officers, a review of procedures, and open discussions with the community. Whether those promises would last, I didn't know. But at least for once, accountability had been demanded. As for me, life didn't suddenly become easier. The threats didn't vanish. The memories didn't fade. Every time I heard a siren, I flinched. Every time I walked past a police car, My heart raced. The scar inside me remained, invisible but heavy. Yet there was something new within me, too strength. I learned that fear could be transformed into fuel, that a voice, even one shaking with uncertainty, could echo louder than silence. I had come to Minnesota searching for knowledge, for a better future. What I found was far more than textbooks and classrooms. I discovered how fragile life is, how quickly it can be taken. But I also discovered the power of speaking out. And though the memory of that night will haunt me forever, I know this: truth can protect others, even if it nearly cost me everything. 3. A voice that broke the silence. When my story appeared in the newspaper, I thought it might fade away after a few days, like most headlines do. But instead, it snowballed. What began as a terrifying mistake in the middle of the night turned into something much larger: a fight for truth, safety, and justice. Within days of the article's release, I was invited to speak on a local TV station. I had never been in front of a camera before. The studio was cold, the bright lights almost burning my skin, and the camera lens stared at me like an unblinking eye. The host smiled politely, but I could see the anticipation in her eyes. Another sensational story. I swallowed hard as the microphone was clipped to my shirt, and when the red light above the camera blinked on, I knew there was no going back. I told them everything: how I was walking back from the library that night, the screech of tires, the blinding spotlight, the barked orders, the gun barrels aimed directly at me. My voice trembled, and my hands clenched into fists on my knees. Yet, I spoke. Every word felt like peeling open a wound, but also like letting it finally breathe. When the interview aired, my phone lit up with messages. Strangers reached out. Some thanked me for speaking. Others told me their own horror stories of being stopped, searched, humiliated, sometimes hurt, all because of a mistaken identity. It was overwhelming. I realized my near-death moment wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern. At first, this solidarity gave me comfort. But then the shadows crept in. Among the thanks were threats. Anonymous texts and emails that said things like "keep your mouth shut," or "you'll regret crossing the police." I tried to brush them off, but at night, lying in my dorm room, those words cut through me like shards of glass. I'd stare at the ceiling, heart racing, wondering if someone outside was watching. One night, I looked out my dorm window and saw a familiar police cruiser parked across the street. Its headlights were off, but I recognized the shape, the markings. My stomach dropped. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe paranoia. But my body reacted with raw fear. From that moment on, every siren in the distance felt like it was meant for me. Amy, the girl from the Student Human Rights Club, noticed I was unraveling. She confronted me after one of our meetings. "Listen," she said firmly. Her eyes locked on mine. "If you stay silent now, this will happen to someone else. You survived. That means you have the chance to speak for those who can't." Her words pierced through my fear. She was right. Silence was a prison, and I was already trapped in it. The only way out was through my voice. So when I was asked to speak at a public hearing in the city hall, I agreed. Even though the very thought of standing on a stage in front of officials and strangers made my knees weak, I knew I had to do it. The day of the hearing, the hall was packed. Students, professors, journalists, activists, and local residents filled the seats. Their murmurs buzzed in the air like a swarm of bees. From backstage, I peeked at the crowd and felt my chest tighten. My palms were slick with sweat, and for a brief moment, I considered slipping out the back door. But then I remembered that night, the flashlight blinding me, the trigger ready to be pulled. If I ran now, it would be like letting that moment own me forever. When they called my name, my legs carried me forward, almost against my will. The stage lights were blinding, far harsher than the TV studios. The microphone loomed in front of me, amplifying the sound of my shaky breath. I gripped the edges of the podium, trying to steady myself, and then I began. "My name is." I paused, swallowing hard. "I am a student at Minnesota College, and a few weeks ago, I almost died." The room hushed instantly. I could hear the faint rustle of someone shifting in their chair, the click of a pen. Every eye in the hall was on me. I told the story, the shouting officers, the guns aimed at my chest, the hopelessness flooding through me as I thought my life was over. My voice cracked at times, but I pushed through. I described the fear, the humiliation, the anger that burned inside me. I explained how it felt to be reduced to nothing but a shadow of suspicion, how a single mistake almost erased me from this world. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Then, slowly, applause broke out. It grew louder, people rising to their feet. Some clapped with tears streaming down their faces. For the first time since that night, I felt something lift off my shoulders. My voice, fragile, trembling, had broken the silence.